If you ask, can any writer of any document ever be believed fully, that's a more difficult question. It is a very, very difficult thing to report conversations with perfect accuracy, unless you're a stenographer. Everybody cheats a bit, everybody hears the bits that he wants to hear, and most people, particularly amateur reporters like dukes, put in what people at the other end would like to hear, no doubt.
Yes, let's consider this particular amateur reporting duke for a moment. Do you think that he was really writing what he thought his Führer wanted to hear?
I doubt whether he was capable of such a cynical thing as actually guessing what Hitler wanted to hear. He was an elderly chap who'd never done much in life. We know that later on his war crimes were estimated at being worth a fine of £150. Well, that's about the level he was on.
Why was he in Britain at the time? What was the occasion of his visit? Was he sent here?
No. Funeral of George V. He was a first cousin of George V, the grandson of Queen Victoria, and he came as one of the family.
So that perhaps there's some justification in what one paper said, that these conversations were simply tea-table tittle-tattle at Buckingham Palace.
Of course. I mean, he had private talks with the king, who was son of his first cousin, and he went around and saw a lot of other people. My impression is that they said things to him in a most casual, trivial way, and that he wrote them down much more seriously than they ever intended.
But they were probably given serious attention in Germany.
Who could say? The Duke of Coburg sent them to Goering. Goering presumably passed them on to Ribbentrop, to Hitler. We know that both Hitler and Ribbentrop later on imagined that Edward VIII could have been used as an instrument favourable to Germany, but this was more Ribbentrop's personal hunch than anything that they got at this time. I don't think really that they took any notice of these conversations.
These documents were not written for the general public, but they're being made available to the general public now, and reports of them, or reports of part of them, will be widely read. What should people bear in mind in reading them?
Edward VIII is credited with saying that he wanted to see good relations between England, France and Germany, and that so far as he could, he would help to improve these relations and to bring the three countries together. This is what every Englishman was saying at the time. It's what, I don't say Baldwin was saying it because he didn't pronounce much on foreign affairs, but it's what Eden was saying, what Duff Cooper was saying, what everybody, not only which the Duke of Coburg saw, but all Labour men were saying. When a month later Hitler reoccupied the Rhineland, the Labour Party was lyrical with pleasure at this, because they said, now we can get a relationship between Germany and France on the basis of equality.
So you would say that the Duke of Windsor's comment is fair, that the statements attributed to him were ripped out of their context?
Oh, I think so, yes. For instance, it starts with the remark, who's king here, Baldwin or me? Well, if the king had any doubts about this, events a few months later taught him that it wasn't he who was the king.
There is a lot about what the king said about Germany, but as you've just pointed out, there's quite a lot more about what the king thought about being king. Do you think that these documents indicate a view of the monarchy that could not have been maintained had the king not abdicated?
I don't think that the king seriously ever maintained these views. When the crisis arose over his abdication at the end of the year, he behaved with the most rigid constitutional propriety, which is more than can be said for some other people who took part in the abdication. This again, it's the kind of thing which you say late at night to your first cousin. The king's just come to the throne, here's his first cousin come to see him, and naturally he's walking up and down a bit and saying, I'm going to be king, I'm going to make a difference.
Do you suppose, as a historian, that had the king not abdicated, he could in fact have changed the pattern of constitutional monarchy from that which had been established by his grandfather and was carried on by his father?
Well, in my view, historians should not engage in speculating about what could have happened or might have happened. We've quite enough difficulties in discovering what happened without running after the might-have-beens of history. Still, I, as it were, not as a historian, but as a detached observer, I will say this. If Edward VIII had stayed on the throne, or if when he left the throne, a crossing sweeper had been put there in his place, It wouldn't have made the slightest difference to the character of British monarchy or British politics or anything that happened in this country.
You yourself have read the whole of the documents. Do you consider that they've been fairly represented by the extracts published in the press today?
Well, if by that you mean in a serious historical way, no, it's presented as a sensation. And I've no doubt at all that the attention of the newspapers was drawn to it by a circular that went out with the book. Nowadays, publishers very often tell reviewers how they ought to review the book, say this is a good book, say it's a marvellous book, these are the best things in it. And of course, the stationery office wants to sell this dreary great volume at 80 shillings. I would suspect also that if instead of being Edward VIII, this had been a conversation a year later with George VI, that it would either not have been published or would have been kept a good deal quieter. And the high and mighty, they never forgiven Windsor for the abdication, and if they can smear a bit of dirt on him, they are not sorry to do it.